Well, good morning. I am Scott Giles, the affiliated community minister to this congregation. My pronouns are he, his. I stand before you this morning dressed entirely in a black suit, and my hairline has receded so far back the History Channel wants to make a show about it. My call to worship this morning was written by Richard Feynman, a famous physicist. Nature uses only the longest threads to weave her patterns, so each small piece of her fabric reveals the organization of the entire tapestry. And to light our chalice this morning, words called The Responsive Path Ahead by Carolyn Hayek. We light our chalice, hoping for insight into the responsible path ahead. We seek better understanding of how to ensure justice, equity, and compassion for all, and how to show greater respect for the interdependent web of all existence. We celebrate the diversity and uniqueness of those gathered here and honor the contribution that each brings. May the flaming chalice inspire us to share our best selves. Together, we can achieve greater wisdom and significant progress toward our individual and common goals. And our first hymn this morning is 137. We utter our cry. Please stand as you're able. Standing and recite in unison the words of our covenant. We unite to strengthen the bonds of kinship among all persons, to promote dignity, and to increase reverence for life's creating, sustaining, and transforming power through worship, study, and service.
Good morning. It's time for the Story for All Ages, so we invite children of all ages to come on down if you want and come sit on the altar.
Hi, my name is Yvette Johnson. My pronouns are she and her.
And I'm Debbie Lee. My pronouns are also she, her.
We're going to tell a story about brains. Are you ready, kids?
Maybe you should direct it to those kids.
Bubblegum brain. Ready? Get mindset. Grow. Written by Julia Cook, illustrations by Allison Valentine. I have bubblegum brain.
I have brick brain.
I like to chew on my thoughts, flex, bend, and stretch my brain, and expand the way I think. I make great mistakes that help me learn.
With me, things are the way they are, and they're probably not going to change much. I am the way I am, and that's just how it is.
Hey, this looks fun.
This looks hard.
I can't wait to try.
What if I fall?
This takes a lot of balance.
This is so hard.
I just can't figure this out yet.
I just can't figure this out at all.
This new song is so cool. I hope I can figure out how to play it. Then I can jam.
There is no way my accordion teacher can expect me to play this song. It is way too hard for me.
Crash, boom. Hey, look, I just made another great mistake.
Splat. This stings, literally.
Well, math homework isn't my favorite. It's gonna take some time to get this done.
Math homework isn't anyone's favorite. I can't do this. Why even try?
Here I go again. Only this time, I have an idea.
There is no way I'm ever going to get this. This is hopeless. Forget it. Only weird people ride unicycles anyway. I quit.
Oh, this is so fun!
I can't do it. I stink at it. Big time.
Well, try using your bubblegum brain.
I don't have one.
Yes, you do. Everyone does. Your brain only looks like a brick. But just peel off your bubblegum wrapper. See? It isn't even that thick. Now your brain is free to grow and hope and stretch and bend. Get rid of that fixed mindset of yours and the possibilities will never end. Now that you've peeled off your wrapper, your hope can start to grow. And what you are learning becomes a lot more important than what you already know. Add a yet to every I can't that you have. And don't ever stop at I stink. You need to tell yourself it's okay to make a lot of great mistakes. What matters most is how hard you work at becoming a better you.
Well, riding a unicycle isn't going to make me a better me.
True, but it's fun. Now try it again, only this time, use your bubblegum brain.
I just can't do it. Boom! Splat. Crash.
You mean you can't do it yet?
I can't do it yet.
Now you're getting it. Hey, what if I try this? Woohoo! I wonder how far I can go next time. Oops.
Now that's more like it.
This bubblegum brain thing actually works. It's really fun to think like this.
The sky is the limit when my wrapper is off, and my brain isn't stiff like a brick. Now, I know I must look outside the box because becoming is better than being. I need to become a more hopeful thinker and make some great mistakes. I think I'll try to go a little bit farther this time, a little bit farther, and a little bit farther. Should we try playing our accordions while we ride?
You're kidding, right? The end.
I am always impressed by the excellence of the musical program of this congregation. I'm always impressed by the musical excellence of this congregation. My reading this morning comes from the book entitled The Lucifer Principle, a scientific expedition into the forces of history by Howard Bloom. The Lucifer Principle is a complex of natural rules, each working together to weave a fabric that sometimes frightens and appalls us. Every one of the threads in that tapestry is fascinating, but the big picture is more astonishing still. At its heart, the Lucifer Principle looks something like this. The nature scientists uncover has crafted our viler impulses into us. In fact, those impulses are a part of the process she uses to create. Lucifer is the dark side of cosmic evolution, the cutting blade of the sculptor's knife. One result? From our best qualities come our worst. From our urge to pull together comes our tendency to tear each other apart. From our devotion to a higher good comes our propensity for the foulest atrocities. From our commitment to ideals comes our excuse to hate. Since the beginning of history, we have been blinded by evil's ability to don a selfless disguise. We have failed to see that our finest qualities often lead us to the actions we most abhor. For millennia, men and women have asked that spears be turned into pruning hooks and that humankind be granted the gift of peace. But prayers are not enough to dismantle the curse that Mother Nature has built into us. We need a new way of looking at humanity, a new way of reshaping our destiny. Our next hymn is one of my absolute favorites, and I'm looking forward to hearing you sing it. Number 304, A Fierce Unrest. Please rise as you are able. Well, the past 2 times I have been in this pulpit, I've chosen to speak about New Testament scholarship. Today, having previously concerned myself with heavenly matters, I decided to give equal time to the opposition. My sermon today, Springtime for Lucifer. Of course, I'm pulling your leg. My topic does not concern the biblical or mythological Lucifer. Instead, I'm focusing on only one point in a big book called The Lucifer Principle by historian and freethinker Howard Bloom. Bloom is an interesting guy. He's an academic who never pulls his punches, to the point where his critique of Islam has gotten him sentenced to death in 17 countries. Lucifer is the Latin word for light bringer or morning star. It shows up in very early translations of the biblical book of Isaiah, although most scholars now believe that is in fact a mistranslation. The idea that Lucifer was a fallen angel cast out of heaven after an unsuccessful rebellion against God, well, that became a synonym for the devil or Satan, because there's a passage in the Gospel of Luke about Satan having been cast out of heaven, and over the years, an identification has occurred. But none of this is my focus this morning. My focus is on something else. The Lucifer principle is that everything has an alternative and often a darker side, but we typically overlook that because it's easier. Progress is often the result of things we would rather overlook because it can make us feel uncomfortable if we notice them. The Lucifer principle asks us to give the devil his due, because while it's easier to tell ourselves stories that make us feel good, that is intellectually and spiritually lazy. We will always be better off if we look at the whole picture and consider that things are sometimes not what they seem. Let me give you some examples. Consider that almost everyone in this room has a smartphone. You probably also have a computer or tablet at home. At the heart of all of these devices that are central to modern technology is the integrated circuit, often called the computer chip. They are everywhere and in everything. Why was the computer chip invented? Was it the product of enlightened scientists trying to make the world better? No, actually, they were developed by MIT in the 1960s as part of the Apollo project, the push to have America be the first nation to get to the moon. The Apollo project existed because the Cold War existed. America was in a race to the moon because Presidents Kennedy and Nixon wanted America to get there first in order to show the world that America was better than the Soviet Union. It was done for political propaganda. As scientist James Lovelock would remark, if it hadn't been for the Cold War, neither Russia nor America would have been sending people into space. That's why the early moon missions were largely stripped of scientific equipment. Oh, they brought back some rocks, but the heavy-duty scientific instruments were left at home. Apollo wasn't about science. It was about showing the communists up. And that's why you have a smartphone in your pocket today. The origin of the computer chip is in politics, propaganda, and war. America needed to show the world that our know-how was better than the Russians. As later President Ronald Reagan would say, "Here's my strategy for the Cold War. We win, they lose." That's why you have a smartphone. The Lucifer principle is the idea that everything has an alternative and often a darker side, but we typically overlook it because that's easier. A lot of us get our entertainment today by streaming shows and movies over the internet, Netflix, YouTube, and so on. Well, the ancestor of our ability to show movies in our home was the video cassette recorder, or VCR. Remember those? Probably all of the older members in the congregation today had one of these big boxes in our homes. And there was a blockbuster video on every street corner. The VCR allowed us to buy or rent movies on magnetic tape that we could watch in the privacy of our homes. Well, the VCR was invented by a company called Apex in 1956. But the machine was the size of a desk and cost about $500,000 in today's currency. Almost no one had one. Then Sony and Philips Corporation found a way to make VCRs smaller. But still, they were considered a niche product that only a few people would want. The machines were expensive and not in mass production. But then something happened in the 1970s to spark consumer demand. Suddenly, a lot of people wanted these devices. Production ramped up, prices fell. What happened? According to most historians of technology, it was the sexual revolution. It was the idea that moral behavior had changed and previously frowned upon stuff was okay. People wanted to be able to view a certain type of movie in the privacy of their own homes. The result was the VCR market exploded. And that's got us all hooked on the idea of watching entertainment in our homes on our own schedule. Then came DVDs and now streaming. Even if your own viewing habits are completely vanilla, it still had its beginning in the widespread social desire to indulge other interests. This is where your streaming video came from. The Lucifer Principle is the idea that everything has an alternative and often darker side, but we typically overlook it because that's easier. I'm a medical hypnotist, which means I help people using the power of their minds to cope with physical and emotional problems. No one has more respect for modern medicine than I do, and I'm proud to be part of it. But don't get me wrong, I respect traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine from India and other modalities. And I think there are problems with Western medicine. But all that said, what traditional medical systems like homeopathy, Chinese medicine, and Ayurveda accomplish doesn't hold a candle to what Western medicine routinely accomplishes with imaging, surgery, medicines, chemo, radio, and immune therapy. What is it that has made Western medicine so much more effective than folk remedies or less scientifically oriented medical philosophies around the world? Was this fueled by deep contemplation, enlightened exploration? No, according to most medical historians, it was fueled by grave robbing. You see, the thing that sets Western medicine apart from other medical systems was its relentless quest to understand how the human body actually worked. That was new. In ancient times, physicians worked with theories about how the human body functioned, but they didn't pay attention to actual human bodies. In ancient China, people used to tell the physician what hurt by pointing to the part of an ivory doll on which the acupuncture meridians had been engraved, and the physician worked from that. The physician never examined your actual body. In ancient Greece, when the philosopher Aristotle wrote his book on medicine called The History of Animals, he reported that men have more teeth than women. He said this because he believed that teeth were related to wisdom, which is why we call some teeth wisdom teeth to this day. And because he believed that men were wiser than women, it would follow they would have more teeth. He published that. This was an error the twice-married Aristotle could presumably have avoided by asking the current Mrs. Aristotle to please open her mouth. But he didn't do that. None of them ever did that. Ancient medicine around the world didn't look at actual bodies. True, in ancient Egypt, embalmers worked with bodies, but they were a secret guild that had no contact with the physicians. The Romans did some things with minor surgery and herbs, but had no idea about how the body actually worked. They thought illness was a disturbance in bodily humors, substances called yellow and black bile, blood, and phlegm that are actually completely unimportant. Western medicine was unique. Every aspiring doctor learned firsthand by dissecting a human body. They realized that allowed them to make rapid progress over ancient times. Every doctor knew it, and that is why such dissection is a standard practice of medical education even today. Attending to actual anatomy is the defining characteristic of Western medicine. However, at a time before refrigeration, and at a time where the church taught that if your body was not buried whole, you might not arise when Jesus returned, the medical schools needed a steady supply of cadavers they could not get legally. Consequently, a lively trade in bodies developed, led by people who called themselves professional resurrectionists, and whom we call grave robbers today. So common was this practice that people began to build stone mausoleums in cemeteries to hold the remains of their loved ones. That's why they exist. That's why when you look at such structures today, you will see they have stout iron doors with complicated locks and bars over the windows. Less prosperous people were often buried in metal cages that you can still find sticking above the ground in older cemeteries. These things were there to stop the resurrectionists. The success of modern scientific medicine, something all of us rely on, comes from its commitment to study actual human anatomy, but that success was fueled by the patronage of an illegal and horrible practice, grave robbing. The Lucifer Principle is the idea that everything has an alternative and sometimes a darker side that we typically overlook because it's easier. Giving the devil his due and remembering that things are not always what they seem requires a lot more intellectual work. Over my 46 years of pastoral ministry, I've come to believe that there is an emotional state that carries a danger for everyone. That emotional state is self-righteousness. It results from believing that you are better than you are. And it's easy to do. Most of us would like to believe that. I'm reminded of Garrison Keillor's Minnesota town of Lake Wobegon from his radio show, Prairie Home Companion, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. Yep. We all remember that, don't we? We all want to think we're pretty good. Psychologists call this the self-enhancement illusion. Everyone believes they're correct in what they believe. Everyone believes they are right. No one gets up in the morning and said, I was wrong yesterday, and by the grace of God, I will be wrong again today. Self-righteousness happens when you forget that you could be mistaken. You do that because it's easier. The difference between a healthy-minded confidence and an unhealthy self-righteousness is when you lose perspective. The Lucifer Principle shows us that people tend to think ideas that are easy, ideas that make us feel good. No one wants to consider there might be an alternative side because that's work. No matter how convinced you are about something, there is always the possibility there could be more going on than you realize. As we've seen with my little history about technology, video, and medicine, things are not always what they seem. In the grip of the self-enhancement illusion, we can forget that, and that encourages self-righteous thinking. Well, why do we let ourselves feel self-righteous? Religion is notorious for this. In theology, there is a long-standing problem. Theologians call it the problem of evil, or more technically, the problem of theodicy. Simply, if God is all good, why do bad things exist? If there's an all-powerful God out there, how come bad things happen? There have been many answers attempted. My favorite humorous attempt was by comedian Woody Allen in his book Without Feathers, and he proposed that maybe God is just sort of an underachiever. I mean, he means well, but he just can't get it together. A much more serious treatment that I like is found in the 1981 book When Bad Things Happen to Good People by Rabbi Harold Kirshner. But this is an ancient debate that's been going on for as long as philosophy has existed. But one way to solve this problem is simply to blame bad things on someone else, like a bad spiritual power. This is the solution proposed by most traditional religious groups, including contemporary religious groups, including groups that are meeting this morning in large sanctuaries not far from us. There is the Christian Lucifer, the Jewish Satan, the Buddhist Mara, the Islamic Iblis, and many others. Bad things happen because someone is to blame, a dark power actively working against the good. This is an easy answer to propose because it's simple to blame someone else. Religious groups do this to other religious groups all the time. Politicians do it to each other. Racial groups do the same. White European culture uses the words dark and black to imply something bad for a reason. Other racial groups return the favor with other words. Just look at our national political landscape and you will see the same thing. Finger pointing is everywhere. The easiest way to deal with something you don't like is to point the finger of blame. We all have a part that wants to do this by default, and we find ourselves blaming others by reflex. Even St. Paul in the book of Romans says in exasperation, "For the good that I would do, I do not do. The evil that I do not want to do, that is what I do." He was in a situation where he knew better, but the part of him that wanted an easy excuse took over, and he said and did things he didn't really want to say or do. It's easy. My wife, the Reverend Dr. Lindsay Bates, who is here today to criticize me, used to tell her congregation of 40 years that she had an 11th commandment: thou shalt not other. You should not blame other people for problems. It may make you feel better, but that's not how you solve problems. You solve problems by giving the devil his due, and remember that things are often more nuanced and complex than they seem. Blaming others for what you don't like is tempting, but it's lazy. And reality is always healthier than fantasy. I don't know about you, but I'm not looking forward to the national election we're going to have in a couple of months. My concern is the amount of anger and vitriol I see out there in society. Because my work in cancer care cuts across every political and socioeconomic divide, I have clients of every political belief and lifestyle circumstance, so I hear it all. Sometimes I get scared at the anger people in one political camp have toward people in another. It's gotten so bad that I began to joke that my real hope is that I will be abducted by aliens prior to the election in November. Yeah, at first people laughed, but I now have a list of people who would like me to pick them up along the way, should that happen. And by the way, the list is full, so I will not be passing a clipboard around coffee hour. The fuel for this social problem is that people have become self-righteous. They believe their side is completely right, the other side completely wrong. It leads people to talk past each other, and nothing ever gets settled. And this is why we hear threats of violence and talk of civil war. I'm deeply concerned for the future of our nation, and I've seen firsthand families divided over issues. I've seen self-righteousness destroy businesses, corporations, church congregations, and more. We have to get past this if we're ever to coexist. I used to make this mistake. I assumed my progressive ideas were correct and only bad or dumb people would disagree. I've had to learn that people on the other side of a political or philosophical divide are not bad or dumb. They are simply attending to different aspects of the situation than those that I perceive. Now, they may be falling for an easy answer and not thinking holistically, but that's what I was doing when I dismissed them. Once upon a time, I was a chef. The best restaurant I ever worked in was one where the owner believed that a happy kitchen was a productive kitchen. Therefore, he said, I'm making it your job to put up with certain kinds of people. You have to put up with them, they have to put up with you, because it's part of your job. That's a job I think we all have. Now, obviously, there are some things about which we can be sure. Abuse is always wrong, oppression is always wrong, hate is always wrong, and that's not an exhaustive list. But for most things, a difference of opinion is not a bad thing. If you talk to people who may disagree with you profoundly, you may discover another aspect of the issue that you had not considered, like where your smartphone, your streaming video service, or your medicine actually comes from. It's hard. Like everyone else, I think that what I believe is correct. It does take fortitude to hear others out. When I try to do it, I often find myself biting my tongue and clenching my fists. And while it's painful to admit, sometimes the other person does turn out to have a fair point and feels that they do because there is a side to the issue that I had not considered. Everything has an alternative side that we typically overlook because it's easier. We Unitarian Universalists are part of a merged denominations. Originally, the Unitarians and Universalists were separate. Unitarians largely urban, Universalists largely rural. We merged in 1961. My first parish ministry was a rural congregation at the tip of Long Island, the first Universalist Church of Southold. Universalist congregations often have a very different flavor than Unitarian. It was an old congregation founded by farmers. It had its heyday during the popularity of spiritualism in the 19th century, and there were seances held in the parsonage, where the minister, one Reverend Fishbarrow, was the medium. During the McCarthy era, they worried about Soviet spies, and during Prohibition, it was said there was a still running on church property. Every political belief you could imagine was represented, including some that are extreme even by today's standards. But it was a point of pride in that congregation that all of the members could find a way to coexist, and had done so for more than 100 years. It wasn't always easy, but they pulled it off. They found ways to disagree, sometimes profoundly, while staying in connection. Let me suggest the Lucifer Principle is helpful here. The idea is that everything has an alternative side that we typically overlook. We are living in a tense and unsettled time. If we're going to get through this well with our friends, neighbors, co-workers, and what have you, we will have to remember that it is part of our job to put up with certain kinds of people, and they need to put up with us. There will need to be a springtime for Lucifer, or at least the Lucifer Principle. Otherwise, we will become self-righteous, and only pain will come of that. The Lucifer Principle reminds us that we need to be willing to do what is not easy. Remember that things are often more complicated, and there's usually an aspect we are overlooking. And I sincerely hope we will manage it. If anyone can, we can. And that's my sermon. Now, please join in our closing hymn, which is hymn number 1. May nothing evil cross this door. Whoops, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. I take it back. You see, I was Lucifer, I got it wrong. And the president of the congregation says that she has an offertory, so I'm not going to give you the one that I had planned. Let her do it.
I'm channeling Rem Stokes today with the shirt that I got from his idea, which is the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And after church, we're going to sprinkle some of his ashes behind the church. So I thought it would be good to share a little inspiration from Rem. He was a member of our church for decades and passed away a couple of years ago. And he was very instrumental in getting money from us and building this church. And he also wrote his own, eulogy almost. So I take a little bit from him. And he said, "My spiritual journey was an internal struggle of coming to grips with my own life, of recognizing that growth and happiness comes from transcending the ego. It was replacing fear and greed with courage and generosity. Gratitude is the parent of generosity. It was building self-worth, not net worth. It was finding abundance in all the landscapes of my life. It was supporting those values that instill certainty and security in people, namely truth, justice, and love." And he continued, "I believed in serving causes greater than self, in engaging in the world, investing my life in things that complement my values, trying to make a positive difference, and participating generously and constructively in the needs of the community. My time on this earth was limited. I did not intend to waste it in the hope of a future life. If I am wrong, I win twice." the offertory will be gratefully received.
And now, please rise as you're able to sing hymn number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door.
May the Lord and bring no
Now, please remain standing and recite responsively with me the words of our benediction. And now may the truth that makes us free, and the hope that never dies, and the love that casts out fear, lead us forward together, until the day spring breaks, and the shadows flee away. Amen. Please be seated.